It all started on an ordinary Tuesday evening. The kind of evening where nothing extraordinary is supposed to happen. I was driving back from work, tired, my head heavy with unfinished tasks and emails I had ignored. My phone buzzed once on the passenger seat, but I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. By the fourth vibration, I finally glanced at the screen. It wasn't a message from a colleague or a random notification. It was a video, sent from an unknown number. The text that came with it was chillingly short. "You need to see this." My pulse quickened as I tapped play. At first, the video was grainy, shaky, like it had been recorded on a hidden camera. But as the picture cleared, my stomach dropped. It was my living room, my couch, my coffee table. And sitting there, laughing, was my wife. But she wasn't alone. She was with my best friend. They weren't just talking. Their hands touched in ways that explained everything. The laughter wasn't innocent. It was intimate, private, the kind of laughter I thought she had saved only for me. I felt my grip on the steering wheel tighten until my knuckles turned white. My first thought was denial. This has to be some cruel joke. A deep fake. A setup. But then my friend leaned over and whispered something into her ear. And the way she smiled, the same smile she once gave me when she said, "I love you," it broke me. I nearly swerved off the road. But then I noticed something strange. In the corner of the video frame, behind them, a reflection. A mirror. And in that mirror, I saw a shadow. Someone was holding the camera. Someone was recording them secretly. Who? And why send it to me? I pulled over on the side of the road, heart racing, hands trembling. A second message came through. If you want the truth, don't confront them. Follow the instructions. Tonight. No name. No explanation. Just this. For a few minutes, I just sat in the car, staring at the glowing screen. My wife. My best friend. A stranger filming them. And me, the fool sitting here, realizing that the life I thought was mine had just shattered into pieces. I should have gone home. I should have demanded answers. But deep down, I knew, whatever this was, it was bigger than betrayal. Someone wanted me to discover something, and they were playing me like a pawn. When I finally turned the key in the ignition, I wasn't going home. I was driving into the unknown. And that was the night my entire world changed forever. The message came with an address. A street I didn't recognize, in a part of the city I rarely visited. It wasn't far, though, maybe a 20-minute drive. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I typed it into my GPS. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me, "Don't go. Go home. Forget this." But reason had no chance against the storm inside me. I needed answers. When I pulled up, I found myself in front of an old, abandoned warehouse. The kind of place you'd see in a crime documentary: rusted shutters, broken windows, graffiti stretching across the walls. My phone buzzed again. Inside. Second floor. Room 204. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. The warehouse door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing into the vast darkness inside. My footsteps crunched on broken glass. I swallowed hard, trying to silence the pounding of my heart. I climbed the stairs, each step groaning beneath my weight. The second floor stretched into a long, dim corridor. Numbers were painted on the doors, though many were faded and scratched out. My eyes darted from side to side until I spotted it. 204. The door wasn't locked. When I pushed it open, I froze. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting long shadows against the cracked walls. On the table in the center lay a stack of photographs. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting as I looked down at them. Every photo was of my wife and my best friend. Different places. Different days. Restaurants I'd never been to. Parks I never knew she visited. Hotels. But what chilled me most was the detail. Dates scribbled in the corner, times, even receipts clipped to some of the images. Whoever had taken these pictures had been following them for months. My hands shook as I flipped through the pile. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just photos of them. There were photos of me. At work. At the grocery store. Even one of me sleeping in my own bedroom. Someone had been watching all of us. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. In the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, a figure stepped forward. A man in a dark coat, face half covered by the hood. "Finally," he said, his voice low, almost calm. "I've been waiting for you." I stumbled back. "Who the hell are you?" The man ignored the question. Instead, he pointed to the photographs. "They betrayed you. I thought you deserved to know the truth." "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why me? Why are you doing this?" He took a step closer, his face still hidden. "Because they're not who you think they are. Neither of them. You're living in a lie." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. My chest tightened, as if invisible hands were squeezing the life out of me. Then he slid something across the table. A USB drive. Small, ordinary, yet it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. "Watch it," he whispered. "And when you do, you'll understand why your life was never really yours." Before I could respond, he was gone. The door creaked open, then shut. Silence. I stood there alone, my mind spinning, my hands gripping that tiny piece of plastic like it was a ticking time bomb. Somehow, I drove home, though I don't remember how. My wife was asleep when I entered the house, her phone resting on the nightstand, glowing faintly with notifications. I wanted to shake her awake, to scream at her, but I didn't. Instead, I slipped into my office, locked the door, and plugged the USB into my laptop. At first, the screen was black. Then static. And then, images began to play. Not random clips. Not just my wife and my best friend. But me. My childhood. My parents. Places I hadn't thought about in decades. Faces I thought I'd forgotten. And then, a voice, calm, distorted, filled the speakers. "Everything you know is a lie. And the people you trust most are part of it." The days after finding the box were some of the strangest of my life. I tried to go on with my routine, work, groceries, meeting friends, but every spare moment, my mind returned to that wooden box sitting in my apartment. I'd tucked it into the back of my closet, behind old coats and shoes, but I could still feel its presence, as if it were radiating energy into the room. Sometimes at night, I swore I could hear faint scratching sounds, like wood shifting under pressure. Finally, I gave in. One evening, when the city was quiet and the rain tapped gently on my window, I pulled the box out again. I placed it on the table, sat across from it, and just stared. I had no idea how to open it. There was no visible latch, no hinges, no keyhole. Just those deep, hand-carved symbols that twisted into each other like veins. Out of pure instinct, I traced one of the carvings with my finger. The wood was warm, unnervingly warm, as if it had been sitting in the sun all day. And when I pressed harder, something clicked. Not a sound, but a sensation in my chest. My pulse quickened, my breathing shallow. The symbols weren't random, they felt like instructions, a language meant to be followed. I ran my fingers across the carvings in different patterns, experimenting. And then, suddenly, the air in the room shifted. A faint smell of burnt paper filled the air, and the lights flickered. I froze. The box hadn't opened, but I knew something had just happened. The next morning, the messages started. At first, I thought it was a glitch, just random notifications popping up on my phone. But they weren't random. The first one appeared while I was making coffee. "We've been watching you. Don't open it again." My heart dropped. It wasn't from a number I recognized. No caller ID. Just words on my screen, cold and direct. I deleted it, convincing myself it was some scam or prank. But more came. Every time I picked up the box, every time I even thought about trying to open it again, another message would appear. "You're in danger. Walk away now. This isn't meant for you." By the end of the week, I had over 50 of them. Different times, different phrasing, but always the same warning: stay away from the box. But here's the thing, human curiosity is stronger than fear. Every warning made me want to know more. Why was I not supposed to open it? Who was watching me? I decided to investigate the carvings more seriously. I took photos, uploaded them online, and posted in obscure forums for historians and symbol researchers. Most replies were nonsense, trolls, or complete guesses. But one caught my attention. A user with the name archivist_13 replied, "Where did you find this? Don't share it publicly. Meet me in person. This isn't something you want floating around the internet." The message was strange, but it felt different, urgent, almost desperate. I hesitated for hours before responding. When I finally agreed, they sent me a location, an old library on the edge of the city, the kind of place no one really visited anymore. That night, I went. The library was nearly abandoned, lit by only a few yellow lamps. Dust hung in the air like fog. I wandered between towering shelves until I saw him, a thin man in a brown coat, glasses slipping down his nose, his hands trembling as he clutched a stack of papers. "You shouldn't have it," he whispered before I even sat down. His eyes darted around the room nervously, scanning the shadows. "Do you understand what you've brought into your home?" I told him everything, how I found the box, the carvings, the messages. He listened quietly, nodding, then finally placed his papers in front of me. They were filled with sketches of the same symbols, drawn by hand, dated decades ago. "I've spent 20 years studying these," he said. "And in all that time, I've only seen the box once before. A man brought it to me in 2004. 2 weeks later, he vanished. His apartment was found empty, not ransacked, just abandoned. It was like he walked out and never came back." His voice cracked when he added, "The box reappears. Always. Different places, different people. But it chooses who sees it. And once you've seen it, you're marked." I felt cold all over. Marked? What does that mean? The man leaned closer. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in weeks. "It means you don't get to walk away anymore. It means whatever's inside is already connected to you. And if you try to ignore it, it'll find a way to remind you." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A new message. "We told you not to talk." The man saw it too. His face went pale. Without another word, he stood up, gathered his papers, and hurried toward the exit. I tried to follow, but he spun around and shouted, "Don't contact me again. And for your own sake, don't open it." I stood frozen in the dusty silence of the library, clutching my phone, the words burning into my mind. That was the night I realized this wasn't just some mysterious object. It was something alive. Something watching me. Something I had accidentally invited into my life. And no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't just walk away. The weeks that followed blurred together like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. Every night, I'd jolt awake, convinced someone was standing in the corner of my bedroom, only to find empty shadows. Every morning, I'd check the locks 3, 4 times, just to be sure. And every day, the questions gnawed at me. Who had broken into my house? Why were they watching me? And what had I gotten myself into by looking too closely? I kept going back to the neighbor, Mr. Hawthorne. Something about him had always unsettled me. He was polite, yes, but in that overly careful way, like someone who'd rehearsed every word before saying it. His house was always too neat, too quiet. Curtains drawn during the day, lights flickering at odd hours of the night. And then there was the smell, the faint metallic tang I'd caught once when he opened his back door at 2 a.m. What kind of neighbor keeps hours like that? One evening, I couldn't take the not knowing anymore. I decided to watch his house. I turned off my lights, sat by my upstairs window with the blinds cracked just enough, and waited. At first, nothing. The street was silent, only the occasional car rolling past. But then, at 1:47 a.m. exactly, Hawthorne's porch light clicked on. I leaned forward, heart thundering in my ears. He stepped outside, but he wasn't alone. Another man followed him, someone I'd never seen before. They spoke in low voices, too soft for me to hear. Hawthorne gestured sharply toward his basement door, and the stranger nodded. Together, they carried something long and heavy, wrapped in a tarp, down the steps into the basement. I wanted to believe it was something harmless. A piece of furniture. Old pipes. Anything ordinary. But the way they moved, the way they struggled, it was clear. Whatever was inside that tarp was heavy. Too heavy. And the shape of it. God, it looked almost like... I forced myself to stop. My mind was spinning, but I knew what I had seen. And I knew I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I tried to tell someone. My best friend Claire. She listened patiently, nodding, but when I told her about the tarp, her face tightened. "You've been on edge for weeks," she said carefully. "I think you're letting your imagination run away with you. It was probably just storage stuff." I wanted to argue, but her tone left no room. She didn't believe me. That night, I decided I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to find proof. At 3 a.m., I crept outside with a flashlight, dressed in black, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. The neighborhood was silent, wrapped in a heavy fog. I slipped into Hawthorne's backyard, every creak of the fence sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. His basement windows were grimy, but one of them had a crack where the seal had worn down. I crouched low, pressed my eye to the glass, and froze. Inside, under the harsh glow of a single hanging bulb, I saw shelves, rows of them, stacked with jars. Dozens, maybe hundreds. At first, I thought it was food, canned vegetables, preserves. But no. The shapes floating in the cloudy liquid weren't vegetables. They weren't food. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. I couldn't breathe. Something moved behind me. I spun around, flashlight clattering to the ground. A shadow loomed, tall and solid, blocking the faint glow of the streetlight. "Out for a walk." The voice was smooth, calm, but I recognized it instantly. Mr. Hawthorne. I forced a laugh, my voice cracking. "Why, couldn't sleep. Just, clearing my head." He studied me, his eyes sharp and unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Middle of the night's a dangerous time to wander. You never know who you might run into." I nodded, muttered something about heading home, and walked away as fast as I could without breaking into a sprint. I could feel his gaze burning into my back the whole way. When I got inside, I locked the door and collapsed against it, shaking. I had seen enough. Whatever was in those jars, it wasn't normal. It wasn't human. And now Hawthorne knew I'd seen too much. The next day, I found a note slid under my door. No envelope. No signature. Just one sentence, scrawled in blocky handwriting. "Stop watching, or you'll end up in a jar too." I spent the next few days on autopilot, barely speaking to anyone, my thoughts looping endlessly around the same question. Why had Sophie kept this secret? She wasn't just my neighbor. She had been like a second mother after my parents' divorce. And now it turned out she was hiding a family connection that had been literally living in my walls? I kept replaying the image of the boy's face. Pale, almost translucent skin, wide frightened eyes that seemed both young and old at once. He hadn't looked like someone who had simply gotten lost or wandered in. No. He looked like someone who had been there for a very long time. On the third night after Sophie's revelation, I decided I couldn't sit still anymore. I armed myself with a flashlight, a kitchen knife tucked into my hoodie pocket, not exactly heroic, but it made me feel a little less helpless, and went back into the crawlspace. This time, I didn't hear laughter. No giggling, no quick footsteps. Just silence. But the silence was somehow worse, because it pressed against me with a kind of suffocating weight. I moved slowly, careful not to make too much noise as the beams creaked under me. Halfway through, I noticed something I'd missed before, a strip of faded wallpaper, stuck to the wood, peeling at the edges. It was a childish pattern, blue with little white stars. I frowned. That wallpaper didn't belong anywhere in my house. Then I saw more, bits of fabric, old toys wedged between beams, even a tiny shoe, the leather cracked with age. It was as if someone had been building a home inside my home. My flashlight caught something else, a narrow tunnel branching off from the crawlspace. It was jagged, clearly dug by hand, the edges rough and splintering. I felt my throat go dry. Whoever had been here hadn't just been hiding, they had been expanding, creating a whole hidden world beneath my feet. I crouched lower and crawled toward it. The tunnel sloped downward, colder with each foot I descended. At the end, it opened into a small chamber, barely tall enough to stand in. And there, in the corner, was a mattress, old, stained, but unmistakably slept in. Beside it sat a pile of objects, scraps of food wrappers, broken crayons, torn pages from children's books. And sitting right in the center of it all was a photograph. I picked it up carefully. It was faded, edges curled with age. In it, Sophie stood smiling, holding a toddler in her arms. But next to her was a man I didn't recognize, tall, gaunt, with sharp features and unsettlingly dark eyes. His arm was draped over Sophie's shoulder, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I felt my chest tighten. The toddler had to be the boy. Which meant Sophie had been lying again. He wasn't some distant relative, he was her son. As if on cue, I heard it, a low scratching sound behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned my flashlight toward the tunnel entrance. The boy was standing there. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. His face was pale in the beam, his eyes wide, but his lips were pressed tight together, trembling. He lifted one hand and pointed directly at me. Then he whispered, barely audible, "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, clutching the photo. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice cracked. "What is this place? Why are you living down here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, as if terrified of something else. His whole body shook as he repeated, louder this time, "You shouldn't be here." And then, without warning, the tunnel behind him shifted. I swear I heard something, a dragging sound, heavy, like something massive moving closer. The boy's eyes widened in horror. He bolted past me, deeper into the chamber, vanishing into another narrow gap I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to chase him, but that dragging sound, it was getting closer. Louder. The beams above me groaned as if something was pressing against the house itself. My survival instincts kicked in. I scrambled back through the tunnel, nearly dropping the flashlight, my hands raw from scraping against the wood. I didn't stop until I was back in the open crawl space, gasping for air. When I finally crawled out into the hallway, my heart was hammering so violently I thought it might burst. I collapsed against the wall, staring at the photograph still clenched in my fist. I had proof now. Sophie hadn't just been hiding a boy, she had been hiding an entire family secret. But the worst part, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that tunnel wasn't just the boy. Something else was down there with him. For the next few days, Ethan lived in a blur. He barely slept, barely ate. The image of Lily's bruised wrist haunted him like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. He kept replaying everything in his head, every interaction with Lily, every dismissive comment Daniel had made, every strange phone call at night. He realized how many warning signs he had ignored simply because he didn't want to believe the worst. But the confrontation in the parking lot had opened his eyes. Daniel wasn't just controlling, he was dangerous. And Ethan couldn't let Lily face that danger alone. He spent hours on his laptop, digging deeper. He combed through public records, old news archives, and even private forums where people shared experiences with toxic partners. Slowly, pieces started to fit together. Daniel had moved from city to city every few years. Each time, there were whispers, rumors of girlfriends who suddenly cut ties with their families, who vanished from social circles, who seemed to lose themselves completely. And in one chilling case, a woman had filed a restraining order against him. But soon after, she disappeared. The case was buried, dismissed as a runaway. But Ethan's gut told him otherwise. That night, as Ethan scrolled through page after page of information, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was Lily. "Can we talk? Just you and me. I can't take this anymore." His heart pounded. He typed back immediately, "Of course. Where do you want to meet?" Minutes passed before she replied, "The pier." Midnight. "Please don't tell anyone." The pier. The same place where, years ago, she and Ethan used to sit and watch the waves, talking about their dreams. It was private, quiet, and symbolic. But it also set off alarm bells in Ethan's mind. Why so late? Why not somewhere safe, like a cafe? Still, he couldn't ignore her plea. He had to go. At 11:45 p.m., Ethan pulled up near the pier. The air was damp and heavy, fog rolling in from the ocean. Streetlights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the cracked pavement. He walked slowly, scanning the area. His senses were on high alert. And then he saw her. Lily stood near the railing, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale and tired. She looked like a shadow of the girl he remembered, the girl full of laughter and fire. "Lily," he whispered, rushing to her side. Her eyes welled up as she looked at him. "Ethan, I don't know what to do anymore." He gently touched her shoulder. "Talk to me. Whatever it is, I'll help you." But before she could answer, a low voice cut through the fog. "Well, well. Isn't this sweet?" Ethan froze. From the shadows, Daniel emerged, hands in his pockets, a cold smirk on his face. His presence felt like ice spreading across Ethan's chest. Lily gasped. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" Daniel tilted his head, eyes flicking between them. "You really thought you could sneak behind my back, Lily? Meet him here, like old times? How touching." Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between Daniel and Lily. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "She asked me to come. She wanted help." Daniel chuckled darkly. "Help? From you? Don't make me laugh. You've always been jealous, Ethan. Always waiting for me to slip up so you could swoop in and play hero." "This isn't about me," Ethan shot back. "This is about Lily. About how you treat her." Daniel's smirk faded, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. He stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You don't know a damn thing about us. Stay out of it." Lily clutched Ethan's arm, whispering, "Please, let's just go." But Daniel blocked their path, his jaw tightening. The tension was unbearable, like the entire pier was holding its breath. Ethan knew this was the breaking point. He could walk away now and leave Lily trapped, or he could risk everything to pull her out of Daniel's grip once and for all. He took a deep breath, locking eyes with Daniel. "No, I'm not walking away this time." The silence that followed was suffocating. The fog thickened around them, the waves crashing below as if echoing the storm about to break. And in that moment, Ethan realized, whatever happened next would change everything forever. The weeks following that courtroom scene were a blur. On one hand, there was relief. Justice had been served, my father's name cleared, and the truth laid bare for all to see. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the haunting weight of betrayal. It wasn't just about Sarah and Ethan anymore. It was about everyone who had known, who had whispered, who had stayed silent when my family was being torn apart. People I had trusted for years now avoided my eyes when I passed them on the street. Some neighbors looked guilty, others resentful, as if my father's vindication had cost them something too. I couldn't decide which was worse, the ones who pitted us or the ones who still clung to the lies. Sarah tried reaching out once. She showed up at my apartment, her eyes red, clutching a folder of papers. She said it was proof that she'd been manipulated, that she wasn't the mastermind, just another pawn in Ethan's plan. But as she spoke, I could see the cracks in her story. She wasn't just a victim, she had benefited, too. She had signed documents, attended meetings, and lived a life funded by the betrayal she helped orchestrate. I didn't let her in. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at the woman I once thought I would spend forever with, and I realized something painful. Sometimes closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from walking away. But walking away didn't mean forgetting. Ethan was still out there, still maneuvering, still dangerous. He had lost the trial, but men like him never really stopped. They just regrouped, found another angle, another weakness to exploit. And deep down I knew, our story wasn't finished yet. Because when you cut a snake, it doesn't die easily. It waits, it coils, and it strikes again when you least expect it. And I could feel him watching, even in the silence. It was 3 months after the trial when I got the letter. No return address, no signature, just my name scrawled across the front in a rushed, heavy hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 words. "This isn't over. Meet me where it began." There was no doubt in my mind who it was from. Ethan. The place where it began could only mean one thing. The construction site where my father's company first broke ground on the project Ethan later sabotaged. That empty lot had been the spark that lit this whole fire. The contracts, the stolen blueprints, the accusations, the trial. I knew going there was reckless. But I also knew if I ignored him, he would find another way to drag us back into his chaos. So, at sunset, I drove to the site. The air smelled of dust and old wood, the faint echo of machines that once promised progress but instead brought ruin. And there he was, Ethan, standing by the half-collapsed scaffolding, looking thinner, more desperate, but his eyes still burned with that same venomous arrogance. "You ruined me," he hissed as I approached. "Everything I built, everything I deserved. You tore it down." "No, Ethan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You did that to yourself. You used people, betrayed everyone who trusted you. You destroyed Sarah. You destroyed my father. You destroyed yourself." For a moment, I thought he would lunge at me. His fists clenched, his shoulders shook, but then he laughed. A hollow, broken laugh. "You think this is the end?" he whispered. "People like me don't just disappear. The world needs us, the ruthless ones, the visionaries, the men who aren't afraid to take what they want. And you'll always be small, hiding behind your precious morals." I took a step closer. "Maybe. But at least I can live with myself." "Can you?" That question pierced deeper than I expected. His smirk faltered. His eyes darted away for the first time since I'd known him. For a flicker of a second, I saw the man beneath the mask, the coward terrified of his own emptiness. He muttered something under his breath, turned, and walked into the shadows of the lot. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't fear him anymore. Justice wasn't always about verdicts or punishment. Sometimes it was about survival, about choosing not to let the poison seep any deeper into your life. I went home that night lighter than I'd felt in years. My father's name was restored. My family was healing. And though scars remained, they no longer bled. Ethan might resurface someday, but if he did, I would be ready. Because I had learned the most important truth of all. Betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise after it does. And I had risen.